The Virtual Curbside is a production of the Utah chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Utah AAP, working together to improve children's lives through education, advocacy, and networking. Hi, this is Paul Wirkus from the Utah AAP. Welcome to this week's edition of the Virtual Curbside, where we bring pediatric providers together with subspecialists to get smarter about all things pediatric and better acquainted as a community of caregivers. The Virtual Curbside is brought to you in part by a generous grant from Primary Children's Hospital. Primary Children's Hospital, the child first and always. Welcome back to the Virtual Curbside. This month we've been talking about nuances of foster care, and we were fortunate to be able to tie this in with the release of the AAP's new book about medical care, fostering health care for children and adolescents in foster care. We're very fortunate to be able to spend some time with a couple of people who share a more personal relationship with the notion of foster care. We're here today with Arianna Nunez and Faith Smard, both of whom know the foster care system from the inside, and we're very fortunate to have their perspective. Welcome to the podcast, Ari and Faith.
Hello, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having us.
Well, thanks for being here. Before we start, do either of you have any financially relevant disclosures to make?
No.
And I should also point out, both Ari and Faith are up to their ears in medical issues of their own right now. By that, I mean the same sort of issues that most of our listeners have. Ari is a nursing student in Michigan, and Faith is just in the process of interviewing for medical school. Big time for both of you.
Very exciting.
There again, thanks for making time to spend some time with us today. Let me ask you some questions about how medical care has an effect on foster care. First of all, thinking back to when you were in foster care, what kinds of adults made you feel safe or comfortable?
Yeah, adults that made me feel the safest were the ones that were consistent and were predictable. I also appreciated positive adults who encouraged me and focused on my strengths and my goals.
Faith,
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Just the ones that were able to show up, even when it wasn't necessarily their responsibility to do so.
it's a big deal, isn't it? It goes to a real interest in you. Were there small gestures or anything that adults did, routines, that made a difference for you?
I would say this is anything but a small gesture for me, but including me in their family traditions, namely around the holidays. I didn't always have the opportunity to do so in my own immediate family. So receiving gifts or participating in these holiday activities with these other families helped ground me and just made me feel seen.
It's a big deal. Yeah. If you could go back and tell the adults around you one thing you wish they understood about what life was like for you then, what would it be?
Our lives in the system are constantly just filled with chaos. And what we need at that time is consistency and feeling like we have power in our own lives since we're not receiving that in other aspects. And that could be something as small as choosing the meal that we would like to have that night, or in regards to the healthcare system, choosing which arm to get your vaccine in. It just needs to be small and consistent.
And personal.
And that's important too.
Let's make it more particular about healthcare generally. Do you remember what it was like visiting doctors and nurses when you were in foster care? What stands out in your memory?
Yeah, I remember feeling really anxious because when I was younger, I rarely ever went to the doctors. The only time I really went was when I needed stitches or mandated shots to go back to school. So I didn't go to the dentist as a child until I was placed into foster care. So this made every single time going to the doctors feel extremely uneasy for me.
Did you ever feel like any healthcare providers understood what you were going through, or did they just seem completely unaware of what you were going through?
I feel like for me, most of my healthcare providers actually were very unaware of my situation. I mean, I also did not visit the hospital when I was not in care. The first time I really had a primary physician was when I was placed into care at the age of 15. And I remember the doctor referring to my foster parent as my mother. And when he was corrected, the care kind of shifted where he wasn't now referring to me as much. He was almost treating me as a child. And I was just kind of confused because I didn't want pity. I just wanted understanding. And that comes in being able to have a conversation with these youth, right? We want to be involved in the care. And along with that, I wanted to feel like they were aware of my circumstance. But I also understand that many foster youth might not want that. So I feel like a large thing for healthcare professionals to be aware of is that we're not all the same, and to individualize our care. Treat us more as than just a patient, to treat us as a person.
Which is probably generally a good idea, but especially someone who is under a lot of stress and may feel a little depersonalized generally.
Most definitely, yeah. I feel like with foster youth, our power is so often minimized that being able to then feel that and get that back in the doctor's office can make a world of difference.
Is there anything in particular you think people could have done? I mean, you've alluded to it, but anything in particular that would have made you feel safer or like it was more respectful or more personal?
I feel like Ari has a fantastic answer to this one if you want to go first.
Yeah, I think medical providers should share the purpose behind the visit. So when they're walking into the room, educating the patient, like, hey, I'm here to do your routine physical, and this is what we're doing. This is how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and then I'll examine you. Being super mindful how you phrase questions and avoid asking personal or invasive things about their situation. I think it'd probably be really important before you go into the room to read their chart and kind of know, hey, this might be a little bit sensitive or a little bit touchy before they're asking. But even when just walking into the room, I know when I was getting care and I was a patient, when they educated me and they told me, this is why I'm asking it. I'm sorry if that's a little weird. Take your time answering. That made me feel a lot better.
Especially because, as you said before, Ari, some of these visits may have been very foreign to you. You know, a lot of times people have done this sort of thing over and over, but we should probably assume nothing, right?
Right. I think even when I think about going into, like, back when I went to the doctors for like the first time, the lights, you're sitting in a cold, weird chair. They're looking at their computer a ton, and then they're leaving and you're kind of just sitting there like, oh, is there something wrong with me? Using all these like foreign tools, and they don't really comment when they're assessing you. They kind of just, they're whispering out loud, and then you're hyper focused on what they're
Sure.
doing. So I remember feeling really anxious as a kid.
Sure. Can either of you think of anything that any medical people did that made you feel seen, even in a small way?
I feel like building off of what Ari had said, there was one specific instance in which I am quite frightened of needles. And I remember the initial nurse had come in at first, and I was very scared, almost trembling. And she'd made just like a side comment that I'm sure almost every other person would find funny. And it was just like, oh, I've had 5-year-olds react better than this. Like,
Well,
it's just a needle. And to me, I'm like, well, you don't know why I'm scared of this. Like, you have no idea what my experiences are. And then having the doctor come in, and he was perfect. He was so sweet and just asked me, like, okay, we can take this as long as you need. Like, I'm in no rush. Where would you like it? And then also bringing in other parts of care, like asking, what else do you enjoy? Asking me more personal questions that aren't really involved in healthcare conversations sometimes. And I think that was important to me, asking more about my life and what was going on emotionally rather than just physically, because that does affect foster youth because we often have emotional baggage and past that have been involved in trauma. Our physical well-being often depends on our emotional well-being.
absolutely. Sure. And again, it's sort of touching on a theme that I think you've both mentioned, being seen as people. Ari?
That's huge. That's really big.
Yeah. Were there any routines or programs or people who gave you a sense of stability or belonging?
Yeah, I think adults who checked in frequently, just asked just simple things. How was your day? Just how are you doing? Really helped. I think just consistency in adults helped me, especially because I was 16. A lot was going on. I really appreciated adults that were consistent, and I knew they were predictable, and I knew what to expect.
Along with that, actually, there are a few, I guess, resources for foster youth, either within the system or outside of the system. There's First Star Academy, which I was introduced to after I was already aged out, but it's for foster youth who are actually in care at that time, and they help them with transitioning to adulthood or with their education, whether that be graduating high school or moving on to higher education. And it also involves you with other foster youth. When I was in the system, I innocently thought I was the only one in Utah who could be in foster care, when there was a very present community that I just wasn't involved in. So I'm just happy that is now something that's starting to grow a little bit more in Utah, that First Star Academy.
And how does that work? Is that an in-person thing? Is it virtual?
There are some virtual aspects I've heard, but there is more of an in-person aspect. I do know that it's every second Saturday they do meet, and the first half is kind of building your academics and your life skills, I suppose. And then the second half is more built on that community aspect. And we might go to the zoo, or we might go bowling, or paint pumpkins is what we had just done this past Saturday.
So both mentoring, but also relationship building and just support.
Yes, 100%. Because I was never involved in First Star, I thought it was important to almost give back to other youth and show them, okay, there is life outside of care. Like, you can do this. And then just being involved in the community.
Were there people who were in your life over time? And did that help you to become the apparently resilient people you are today?
Yeah, I mean, it was extremely important. I feel like most of the adults in my life, I wish you could see, I'm using quotation marks, left or abandoned me. So I felt like I really appreciated when adults stayed. It made me feel extremely important and valued. I also think my experiences in foster care helped me understand the weight of addiction. I think that kind of goes back to Faith's fear, 'cause that's something like I overcame recently, I guess, and how much addiction just impacts families. So as a nurse, I know it'll be ultimately my responsibility to help educate patients about addiction and substance abuse. I want to be the kind of nurse who not only provides care, but also understanding and education that can help break that cycle of addiction.
Would you say that of course it did, but how do you think your experiences in foster care influenced the adults that you've become?
I love that question because I do think it's an inherent part of me. I think it's made me extremely empathetic to everyone in every walk of life. Having now worked in the ER or ED, depending on the term that you prefer,
Sure.
I see all different types of people. And I know that no matter who walks through that door, I'm going to treat them with the utmost care and respect, because I don't know what they're going through. And respectfully, I'm never going to. You can hear so much and you can kind of gain some perspective talking to them and sitting down and having an open, honest conversation, but only they truly know what they're going through. All I can do at the end of the day is treat them with the respect and the love that I wish I got when people couldn't understand what I was going through.
I mean, I think it's very interesting that both of you are going into healthcare. And so there's something about, I think, both your capacity for empathy and also your interest in making things better for people. Is that a fair assessment for both of you?
Oh, yes, 100%.
What do you think has given you the strength that you both obviously have, and the strength and the resilience that I think you've learned as you've transitioned out of the system?
I feel like foster care made me very independent, which, I mean, I appreciate that about myself, but I feel like I know no one's going to do it for me. So I push myself.
I also agree with Ari. I think it has made me independent. But then surprisingly, on the flip side, when I was in care, I definitely struggled asking for help and then accepting it. And then it's been more in the recent years, maybe through volunteering with, the First Star Academy and seeing these youth, realizing that asking for help is not a weakness, but rather a strength. So that helps me build my resiliency because I know that I'm always going to have a community that I can fall back on and that they're going to support me no matter at what point I am in my journey.
That's great. In looking at the ongoing evolution of foster care, what gives you hope?
I mean, I would say it's conversations like this that there are obviously people who are willing to listen to us and our perspectives and open up conversations for other people to become involved, and just more communities and other types of organizations coming up, such as the 1999 Collective that has just appeared in Utah. And
Tell me
just
what
knowing,
that is, Faith.
so the 1999 Collective, I believe it was created in the more recent years, so around 2024 to 2025, I believe. And it's a collective of people who have been involved in the foster system, whether that be an actual youth in the system or just an advocate. And it's a group that comes together as a community to help, those who have aged out more so than those who are in. Because often when we age out, our resources almost plummet, or at least I felt they did. So this kind of gives those resources back to now us as adults.
What a great concept, right? Because what you hope that you can carry out in some way, but it sounds like is very difficult, is who are your mentors once you're out of a care system?
I mean, for me, I actually felt I didn't really have any. When I aged out of care, I lost the community and my dentist and my pediatrician all at once. And I wasn't told really how to get any of that back. And after a little while, I then heard about WIOA, which is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and then TAL, the transition to adult living. They're programs for youth who are transitioning out, but it's not readily available information. So unless you're actively searching, you don't really have any mentors. So this is why I think groups such as the 1999 Collective and First Star, which will help you transition into adulthood, are important organizations.
Absolutely. Ari, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I'm kind of the opposite as Faith. I wasn't a part of First Star when I was in care, but after I left, I heard about 1999 Collective, and Alexa, she was actually my mentor, and she still is. We talk, every month we kind of check in, and she's been great. She helped out with groceries, some finance stuff, and just if I need any life advice or anything, even just when I applied to nursing school, like she walked me through that process, and she was kind of that mentor for me since 2020 when I was 18. So it's been a while. So I'm really grateful for Alexa.
Absolutely. If you could tell every pediatrician one thing about caring for kids in foster care, what would it be?
I would say to individualize care, avoid a one-size-fits-all approach. Each foster youth has a unique background and coping style, and then allowing empathy to lead care. So you never know what someone has gone through, so always provide just the best care possible. That's what I'm hoping to do as a nurse.
Yeah, good for you. Faith, anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I love Ari's points, and I would say that individualized care is incredibly important. I touched on it a little bit earlier in that trying to avoid making these assumptions and that all of your patients are going to be cookie cutter is important as a healthcare professional because you don't know what their experiences are. And making a specific plan for your patients as you get to know them, opposed to having this general plan that you're going to apply to everyone. I think that being able to individualize it brings back the humanity that I'm sure drew a large part of us to healthcare in the first place.
This is a sort of a redundant question, but can you think of any one thing that a provider could show a patient in foster care that they matter?
I think remembering a small detail is important. I remember it was a little while after I actually had an established primary physician, and I walked in and they knew who I was. They introduced me and said, "Faith, how are you?" And I could tell that they hadn't just looked at the chart. I just walked in. Like they didn't have opportunity to look at the chart. So they truly knew who I was. And said hello and I could tell that they cared. And it was just that small detail of, whoa, someone knows who I am. They know my name. I just think that had a very large impact, probably larger than they realized.
Are there any little things that make a big difference?
Yeah, so I think speaking directly to the youth, not just their caregiver, and then offer choices when possible. So even small ones like which arm they want to do the blood pressure in can be really big.
Mm.
Sure.
Okay, something I actually thought of while she was saying that is I think that's so important. And then along with the choices, maybe asking if there's any part of the appointment in which they would like to have more privately. Because I know with some of my foster parents, I didn't want to talk about some things with them present. I was very embarrassed. So I think having the choice or just the option like, hey, is there anything that you would like to discuss more privately also makes a difference.
Sure. Going back to something you said a little while ago, I know one of the things that people have talked about, and in light of what you've said, it seems even more important. And that's that as youth age out of foster care, that it's certainly within the realm of possibility for a pediatrician to say, look, I can help you make the transition. You can come back and visit me. And to some extent, maybe extending care, but to some extent also being someone who helps make the actual transition to adult care. It's hard enough, I think, when you're doing it in the framework of a family who's making those choices for you. But it does sound like, you age out of foster care and suddenly now you're expected to navigate this on your own. And we should have the capacity to be able to say, let me help.
I couldn't agree more. Along with that, many foster youth have to go through the barrier of switching homes, and that comes along with switching providers
Yeah.
through the switching homes. And I think if it's possible, maybe having that transition conversation with the foster youth and maybe their future physician that they're switching to could help ease that care. Because, like Ari mentioned, that consistency is so important. We often feel abandoned because we didn't have a reliable adult resource to consistently depend upon. So having someone say, okay, you are important enough that we want to actually make sure that you're involved in this transition and you get to know that I'm going to do everything I can to ease this transition and then give the information necessary to this new provider.
It sounds in a lot of ways like the things that we hold up as ideals for excellent medical care generally. You get the impression that you're both tremendously empathetic people who are doing what you're doing because out of a place of both, wanting to be really good at something, but also being very empathetic about it. But all of those things, like making sure that your patient always feels seen, making sure that your patient always knows that you care, making sure that you know that they have a life that exists beyond the exam room. All of those things are important for all of our patients. But I think you've both made, a very persuasive argument that it's even more vital for youth in foster care to feel all of those things and to be addressed individually.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I've learned a lot from what you've said. It's interesting because I've done this and I look back on things that I may have done well and things that I may not have done well. And I just hope that I can be better at the things that I need to work on. And I think your experience has been very helpful for me.
Well, good. I would say likewise. This has been a fantastic conversation. So thank you guys both so much.
Yeah. All right, Faith.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing things that I know are very close to your hearts. And I know that this is a very vulnerable conversation for both of you to have, but such a vital conversation for people like me to be able to understand better how to try to do this better.
And I think that's what it's all about, reflecting back on, I did this great, but I could work on this. But even the fact that you're thinking about that means so much. And I know, like we talked about before, that gives me hope that other providers, other healthcare professionals will do the same thing.
Well, and I think the people who are listening are all listening because we want to be better at this. And, it's always an iterative process. And I think it's true of every aspect of what we do. But I think especially the part that includes empathy and human connection is something that we can all work on and that I think we all aim for. And I think that's the reason why you end up going into something like pediatrics, is because you do want to do a good job. But I think you have given us a lot of insight into how we can do a better job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to expand the conversation.
Well, Ari and Faye, thank you so much for having this conversation. Wish you all the best in the world. You both just seem like tremendous people who are going to offer so much to the world of healthcare in both of the aspects that you're pursuing. And thank you so much for bringing your expertise and for bringing your thoughts and bringing your hearts and sharing so freely with us tonight. To our listeners, thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to getting together again next time. The Virtual Curbside is available on iTunes or wherever you find your other favorite podcasts. Be sure to like us and subscribe. We want you to like us both because we're needy that way and because that will help other listeners like you find us. Check out our website, vcurb.com, for supporting materials, schedules, and other great stuff. The Virtual Curbside is an educational production of the Utah chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. The opinions expressed in this podcast, while carefully considered, are ultimately the opinions of the presenters and not necessarily of the American Academy of Pediatrics or our employers. And remember, the content of this podcast shouldn't be seen as a substitute for seeking actual personal medical care. If this is an emergency, hang up and dial 911. Otherwise, schedule a visit with a caring healthcare provider to try to get to the bottom of your concerns. None of this could happen without Elisa Stoddard, our extraordinary executive director of the Utah AAP. Many thanks to Tim Cosgrove for his help on the website and logo design. Thanks to Paul Wirkus, who also composed the theme music. See you next time.